In 1993, the Breeders were sitting on top of the alternative rock world. Their album Last Splash was a platinum-selling record, and its lead single Cannonball was a weird, brilliant, and absolutely unstoppable global smash hit. They'd bottled lightning, a perfect blend of art rock strangeness and pop genius that defined an entire moment. If you guys are interested, I've done an entire video on the album Last Splash. The link is down below. But their follow-up album, it would take nearly a decade to even show up. It became a legendary cursed project plagued by a revolving door of band members, a recording process that dragged on for years, and a budget that just kept climbing. It almost sounds exactly like the story of Guns N' Roses' Chinese Democracy record. Today's story is one of creative genius colliding with personal demons. It's the story of how the Breeders' most difficult album, titled TK, managed to finally see the light of day despite the odds. Before we get started with today's video, if you guys want to support my channel, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button. And I've been told from a lot of my subscribers that they find themselves unsubscribed from my channel, or they don't see my new videos pop up. So make sure you turn on all notifications. And if you guys missed the announcement, I've started a second channel which covers shorter stories like I used to do in the early days of my channel. The link to that channel is in the description box below. To understand the chaos that created Title TK, you have to understand the explosion that came before it. The Breeders started back in 1989 really as a side project for Kim Deal of Pixies and Tanya Donnelly of Throwing Muses. It was an escape, a place for all the songs that didn't quite fit their day jobs. With bassist Josephine Wiggs and drummer Britt Walford, they cut their 1990 debut Pod, a raw and nervy album engineered by Steve Albini. Pod was a huge hit with critics and musicians alike, including Kurt Cobain, who famously called it one of his favorite records ever. But it was an underground sensation, not a chart topper. By 1992, the Breeders' lineup had changed. Donnelly left to start her own band, Belly, so Kim made a surprising choice. She brought in her identical twin sister, Kelly Deal, to play lead guitar, even though Kelly barely knew how to play the instrument. With Jim McPherson on drums, the classic lineup was born. This was the group that made Last Splash, and what happened next, nobody saw coming. The album was a monster commercial success. Cannonball was on every radio station, every TV screen, and then just as quickly as it all began, it completely fell apart. The Deals never amassed great wealth, but they achieved financial stability. As the group's primary songwriter, Kim earned the largest share and was able to purchase a home in one of Dayton, Ohio's most desirable areas, followed later by a vacation property in Nantucket. Now, despite this, she was rarely at home, as the Breeders, as you can imagine, spent nearly 18 months on the road on an unrelenting tour, fully embracing the stereotypical rock and roll lifestyle. They indulged heavily in drugs and enjoyed the unexpected success that came their way. However, when it was time to head back into the studio, they discovered they were completely stuck, struggling to write new music, failing to record the material they did have, and clashing with the rotating lineup of producers, engineers, and additional musicians brought in to support them. The main issue was substance abuse. It had always been part of the band's world, but now it was a full-blown crisis. While Kim Deal wrestled with alcohol and pot, it was Kelly's heroin addiction that became very public and created a destructive spiral. Her addiction, which she later admitted had started when she was a teenager, got dramatically worse on tour. Jim McPherson quit after Lollapalooza in 1994, with Kim telling the New York Times, "I don't even remember him quitting. I just came downstairs and his drums were gone." The whole thing finally blew up in November of 94. Kelly Deal was arrested after accepting a package containing a few grams of heroin at her home in Ohio. The arrest was headline news, forcing the band's private struggles out into the open. Facing a felony charge and the real possibility of jail time, Kelly was ordered into rehab, and she did spend most of 1995 at a facility in Minnesota, an experience that she looked back on with a mix of anger and clarity. She remarked, "I hated my family. They were all against me. They didn't understand me. I didn't think I had a problem." It was after her time in rehab she ended up relapsing, and Kelly was soon booted from the Breeders. The band was officially put on indefinite hiatus. All the momentum from Last Splash had just slammed into a brick wall. During this period, the members scattered. Kim Deal started work on a new Breeders album, but it just wasn't happening. So instead, she formed a new group, the Amps, with drummer Jim McPherson. They put out one raw lo-fi album in 1995 called Pacer, which felt like a deliberate middle finger to the polished sound of Last Splash. While in rehab, Kelly started writing her own songs, which led to her band, the Kelly Deal 6000. Bassist Josephine Wiggs also moved on. Guitarist Steve Sallet, who played with Kelly Deal in her project, told the New York Times, "I think Kelly was competing for some level of respect. Everybody felt like Kim was the talented one and Kelly wasn't." The Breeders, as the world knew them, were basically gone. Kim tried to keep the flame lit, eventually ditching the name The Amps, and she started calling her new project The Breeders. Sensing an uncertain future, McPherson left once again and joined Guided by Voices. By the way, do you guys want me to do a video on Guided by Voices? Let me know in the comment section below. Kim was the only remaining member from the Last Splash era. Regarding her sister Kelly, she told the New York Times she said she was fired, so this is where we have a discrepancy. When I say something like no being on this record and using heroin, it's not that I don't want you on the record, it's that I want you to stop using heroin. Soon enough, their whole family got involved. Their mother, Mary Ann Deal, according to Kelly, stated, "My mom told Kim, the Breeders aren't the Breeders unless you're both in the band." But for Kim, steering the ship and coming up with new material was a total disaster at first. She burned through money and countless hours in a variety of studios. According to the New York Times, between January and November of 1997, the band spent a total of $339,000, with most of that money being spent on expensive hotel rooms, studio time, and moving musical equipment from one studio to the next. Kim's inability to record a new album was not only fueled by her own substance abuse issues, but her perfectionism, which alienated musicians, engineers, and producers that she spent time with. The years started to blur. 1995 became 96, the 97. The alternative rock boom that the Breeders had ridden so perfectly was now over. The band was fading into a distant memory, a classic story of a group that burned too bright too fast. Much like Guns N' Roses' Chinese Democracy, the Breeders' new record became a running joke in the industry, showing up on their label's schedule of releases. Around 1997, Kim decamped to New York City, living in Battery Park, and the sessions began at the Magic Shop in Soho. But Kim, unable to find a drum sound to her liking, soon relocated to Midtown, moving into a studio that was renowned for its vintage recording equipment. But the band was soon kicked out of the studio, as one night, while Kim was working at the mixing board, her bandmates were smoking crack in the lobby. They soon headed to a new studio, Avatar Studio, where, according to engineers who sat in on the sessions, Deal was completely unfocused, spending an entire day fussing over a click track, something that the listeners would never hear on the final recording. And things only got worse from there. Musicians came and went, as did producers and engineers, and at one point Kim reached out to Last Splash engineer Mark Freegard, but he soon quit too. The band had spent over a year writing and recording and had nothing to show for it. Kim soon reached out to engineer John Agnello, who worked on the Amp Soul record. The pair decided to start from scratch. But Agnello saw that Kim was in no shape to work. During one recording session, Agnello took note of a bag of pot sitting next to Kim, remarking, "I told her, maybe you should cut down on that so that you can focus on the record." And she went off on this whole diatribe on how she knew how to use drugs to influence what she was doing, the whole thing describing how she was matching medications for different songs. I looked at her and I went, wow, this is going to be a problem. Agnello tried to get the project back on track, coming up with a budget as well as a schedule, and he tried to assemble a new band to help Kim, but it was a long, arduous task, with him recalling how one drummer showed up, stating he hung out with Kim for half an hour and said, "You know what, I've got to run some errands," and then he just never came back. Days before they were scheduled to go back to another Soho recording studio with yet another drummer, Deal suddenly vanished just as the band was waiting for her. It turned out Deal had retreated to her Nantucket home. Agnello had had enough. One of the musicians who took part in these sessions, Nate Farley, a friend of Kim's from Dayton, became so depressed that Kim's father drove to New York to pick him up to take him back home. Farley told the New York Times, "I was under the impression that her dad was picking us all up. But when I got into the car, Kim goes, well, I'm staying." I needed to quit playing music for a while after that. But finally, things started to turn around for the better around 1998, 1999. The turning point was when one of the frustrated producers who worked with Kim told a musician that if she was so obsessed with the perfect drum sound that maybe she should play on the record herself. Well, she did exactly that. She actually went back home to Dayton to start practicing the drums. Another important factor in turning the album around was that Kelly, Kim's sister, was now sober, and she returned to the fold to help write new songs. Kim, by this point, was completely fed up with the state of modern recording and the slick sound that had basically taken over the music business. She had cooked up a new mission that she called All Wave. It was a philosophy. It was a strict, almost militant devotion to analog recording. No computers, no Pro Tools, no digital editing. She explained, "I like interesting mistakes," calling her belief a reaction to everything sounding so straight and clean in most records today. Kim later blamed Pro Tools with delaying the album, claiming that she had trouble finding a producer and musicians who didn't want to work without the software. She added to the New York Daily News, Pro Tools became so affordable that all players were staying in their rooms. The drummer could stay in his bedroom and jam on all things he wanted to ever do in his whole life. It wasn't just producers, engineers, and studio musicians, but the studios themselves. With Kim adding, all these studio owners, they just bought their new Pro Tools gear. They were really hesitant to record analog. And they really believed in their hearts that they were doing me a favor. To pull this off, Kim needed an engineer who was just as much of a purist as she was. And the choice was obvious, Steve Albini. He had, after all, engineered their first album, Pod, not to mention Pixie's legendary record, Surfer Rosa. He's a man who famously doesn't call himself a producer, thinking it's a disservice. He's an engineer. His job is to capture the sound of the band playing in a room as honestly as possible. He was the perfect partner in crime for Kim's all-wave manifesto. The seemingly impossible task of delivering a Breeders record intrigued Albini, just as it had Agnello. According to Albini, Deal's persistence was one of the things that he loved about her, and it was with that spirit they began recording songs. In 1999, the Deal sisters headed to Steve Albini's Electrical Audio studio in Chicago. Those first sessions were stripped down and tentative. Kim, who was unable to find musicians who truly understood her vision, ended up playing many of the instrumentals herself, even handling the drums on a few tracks. She and Kelly managed to record 3 songs, including The She and Forced to Drive. It was a beginning, but it quickly became clear that the project really needed a full band. And with Steve Albini on board and Kelly back in the fold, the Breeders just needed a perfect band, and they soon found one. The missing piece eventually surfaced from an unlikely source, the Los Angeles punk scene. While hanging out at New York City's Motor City Bar on Ludlow Street in March of 2000, Kim introduced herself to 3 members of the group Fear, who had played in the neighborhood earlier that night. Member Richard Presley told the New York Times, "She asked us if we wanted to come down to her friend's studio and jam. The bar was closing and she said there was some beer, so we said, yeah, of course, and we jammed until the morning." Guitarist Richard Presley, bassist Mando Lopez, along with drummer Jose Modelis, joined the Breeders. The trio brought a forceful new energy that was tight and driving, but with a rough around the edges quality that meshed perfectly with Kim's off-kilter sensibility. As one critic described it, they sounded polished and ragged at the same time, exactly the kind of imperfect, deeply human rock and roll that Kim Deal had been chasing. A few months later, the band was in Los Angeles staying at an apartment Deal had rented in East LA before heading back to Chicago at Steve Albini's studio. It was here they finished what had become a sprawling multi-year saga. The sessions were intense. Albini's style is stark and revealing. He isolates each instrument, creating a sound that feels incredibly close and exposed. You can hear the air in the room, the natural echo, all the little imperfections that the digital recording is designed to erase. It was a long and expensive process, but finally, after years of false starts and personal collapse, a new Breeders album was taking shape. Reflecting on the project's long and uncertain journey, they gave it a working title from an old journalism slang, Title TK, meaning title to come. The name just stuck. When Title TK came out in May of 2002, 9 years after Last Splash, it sounded like a broadcast from another planet. The music world was dominated by the polished angst of nu metal and the swagger of the garage rock revival. Title TK was something else entirely. It was quiet, tense, and profoundly weird. It was the sound of a band taking itself apart and putting the pieces back together in a new, unfamiliar shape. The album kicks off with Little Fury, which was the perfect mission statement. It starts with a quiet cough and the Deal sisters' voices harmonizing almost a cappella in a way that's both beautiful and just a little bit creepy. If I don't black out. The simple drum beat taps out the time, but it's almost a full minute before a guitar shows up. The lyrics are like broken puzzle pieces. It feels like a mantra for survival, a quiet promise not to let it all fall apart again. This minimal, skeletal feeling defines the whole record. Albini's production gives every single sound its own space, which makes the album feel both empty and incredibly detailed at the same time. Songs like Put On Aside are built on almost nothing but a looping bass line and Kim's tired, repetitive vocals, creating a mood that's both hypnotic and claustrophobic. The album's centerpiece and its first single is a track called Off You. It's a fragile, heartbreaking lullaby that gets to the deep sadness running throughout the record. Over a gentle looping guitar part, Kim's voice sounds cracked and fragile. The lyrics are mysterious but soaked in a real sense of loss. Then out of nowhere, a distorted synth sound splatters across the song, an alien invasion of noises that yanks you right out of this mood. It's a classic Breeders move. I'm on it. But it's not all quiet despair. Huffer is a 2-minute blast, shows off the raw power of the new rhythm section. Son of Three is spiky and playful, while the instrumental TNT is a moody, atmospheric jam. And through it all, you have vocal harmonies between Kim and Kelly. As identical twins, their voices blend together in an almost supernatural way, creating this haunting, siren-like sound that's completely their own. Lyrically, the album is dark and strange, full of druggy references and a feeling of weary survival. The song Sinister Fox repeatedly asks, "Has anyone seen the iguana?" A line that some claim is suspected to be a coded reference to pot dealers. The whole album feels like it's about absence, about being abandoned or abandoning one another. You can hear the struggle to make the album its very sound. It's an album that proudly wears its flaws on its sleeve and turns them into strengths. In an age of digital perfection, Title TK was a radical statement. It was the sound of a band that had been to hell and back and returned with a strange, beautiful, and totally uncompromising document of that trip. When it was released, the reception for Title TK was, well, mixed. That's putting it nicely. Weighed down by the decade-long shadow of Last Splash, it was a commercial dud. It stalled at number 130 on the US charts, and the band was reportedly dropped by their American label Elektra Records right after it came out. The world that had fallen in love with Cannonball had clearly moved on. A lot of critics just didn't seem to know what to do with it. They were expecting the pop hooks of Last Splash, and instead they got this quiet, tense, and to them uneventful record. Pitchfork, in a review that aged like milk, called the album incomplete and messy. Kim even seemed honest about the album's commercial expectations, claiming that Last Splash's success was a fluke, stating, "That was a fluke. The Pixies never sold anything, Pod never sold anything, Safari never sold anything, Title TK isn't going to sell anything. One single sold something, it was an accident." But other critics got it. They immediately recognized the album's deliberate, difficult artistry and its deep emotional core. They saw the guts it took to release an album so completely out of step with the times. In the years since 2002, the second opinion has become the right one. Title TK has been reevaluated and reclaimed as not just a great Breeders album, but maybe their creative peak. It's the definition of a cult classic. An album that has whiffed the masses but inspired a fierce, loyal following amongst those who understood it. Fans and critics now praise its weirdly sparse and minimalist sound, seeing it not as a mess, but as a work of incredible control and restraint. Its influence is all over the intimate, lo-fi indie rock that came after it. It's a monument to analog recording and artistic integrity. For a lot of the band's biggest fans, Last Splash was a commercial high, but Title TK is the artistic one. It's the album you play to explain what makes the Breeders so special. Their darkness, their humor, their vulnerability, and their fearless, stubborn originality. The story of Title TK is a story of triumph pulled from the jaws of absolute disaster. It cost a fortune, took forever to make, and baffled the mainstream, and yet it survives as a stark, yet beautiful and timeless work of art. The story of the Breeders is a story of cycles, collapse and rebirth, fame and retreat. And after the difficult birth of Title TK, the band would tour, go on another long break, and then reunite with the classic Last Splash lineup in 2013. That reunion stuck, leading to the triumphant 2018 album All Nerve, the first record from the lineup in 25 years. Kim Deal seems to have made peace with her past, finally entering rehab after Title TK, and finding stability that had escaped her for so long. She once described the years between 1997 and 2002 as wasted time, a fog of addiction and denial. But out of wasted time came something beautiful and permanent. Out of that chaos came Title TK. It's a powerful reminder that the path to creating something truly unique is never a straight line, and that the most profound art often emerges not in spite of our demons, but because of them. That brings us to the end of today's video, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again on Rock and Roll Your Story sticker.